Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing, incredible, super talented, and beautiful guest to introduce to you now. Bethany Ruff is my favorite guest on our show. Bethany is my lovely wife and was featured on episode 1 and on episode 353 of Boundless Body Radio. Bethany's purpose in life is to help people move themselves out of pain and into their most optimally functioning body. Her entrance into the field of human movement began as an exercise science major at the University of Minnesota-Duluth. Her passion for corrective exercise and rehabilitation grew into something she could have never imagined. Her certifications include a Comprehensive Pilates Instructor course through Peak Pilates, advanced certifications in structural integration through the Rossiter System, as well as Corrective Exercise Specialist and Performance Enhancement Specialist certifications through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. Her precisely tuned eye for movement, posture, and alignment in the human body, coupled with her passion for helping people heal, makes her a powerhouse. With a constant thirst to learn, Bethany helps find the underlying roots of pain and dysfunction and will integrate a tailored approach to a more optimally functioning body. Babe, Bethany Ruff.
She's back.
Welcome to Boundless Body Radio. It's such a joy to actually record an episode with you.
It's about time. Episode 1 and episode 350. I owe you another one.
I was going to say, it's cool that you have been on 2 episodes, but you also have the honor of being on the most cringy episode we've ever done, which is episode number 1. I have listened to it 1 or 2 times since we recorded it, and it is quite cringy.
I don't think I'm going to go back.
I wouldn't at all. But it's really great to chat with you. I've been trying to get you to do this for a while. I know how important your work is, and you do see a lot of people, and you're very, very busy during the day. Your only stipulation for doing an interview with me at any time that wasn't December or January, sometimes when it's snowing sideways here in Salt Lake City, is to be outside. So we are in the front yard. It is a lovely afternoon, quite hot, about 90, 95 degrees. And Lily, our cat, decided to join us. So
we are thriving out here.
She's just eating grass, so I don't think she's going to be contributing much to our conversation today. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about your work. It's interesting. Obviously, I promote you and what you do and talk to people about what you do. And even after, being together for 8 years, owning our business for 4 years, knowing what you do, seeing what you do, it is still a challenge for me to describe exactly what it is that you do in a day-to-day kind of manner, because it is so very unique. If you were in an elevator with somebody and they asked, what do you do? How would you describe what you do to them?
I usually catch people's most attention by first saying I step on people for a living. So that's mostly what my business is. I spend most of my time doing what's called the Rossiter System, which is a form of structural integration. Simply put, it's a type of manual therapy where I'm using my foot as the tool. So Richard Rossiter was actually an advanced rolfer. Rolfers use their hands as their primary tool, hands and elbows. And typically someone who would be going to see them would be doing about 10 to 12 series of sessions. And with me, you're getting to the root cause of pain in about 4 to 6. So I'm holding poles and I'm on stands using my foot as the tool. So it's a 2-person pin and stretch method where we're basically creating heat through friction, and then that person is being coached through different stretches. And the tissue is elongating, we're creating more elasticity, we're getting more hyaluronin to be produced from the body, which is acting as glide between the muscle and the fascia. And over time, muscle is able to optimally lengthen, contract, and relax, bone placement changes. And every couple of hours, I get a chance to do some Pilates sessions. I mostly teach on the reformer, the mat, and the chair, and I strength train as well.
Yeah, wow, okay. I've got tons of questions for you related to that. Before we get into that, let's remind the listeners your personal story of how you got into fitness to begin with. I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I studied exercise science in college, and I wanted to, at that time, become a physical therapist. I learned really, really quickly through doing that schooling that I didn't want to be on the reactive side of healthcare. I wanted people to be seeing me, before their insurance told them they had to, when they still really wanted to get into movement. They wanted to be able to get up and down off the floor with their grandkids, get back to doing the athletics that they enjoyed when they were younger. So I started working with clients one-on-one personal training at Lifetime in Minnesota at the corporate headquarters, and just absolutely fell in love with it. In my youth, throughout my young adolescence, I struggled with an eating disorder, which really kind of pulled me away from my own health. So I took a class that was similar to CrossFit at the time called Alpha Training, and I just remember being so enamored with like the strong, buff women in the class who could lift these crazy heavy barbells. And it kind of reframed my mind to calorie deprivation and being thin and wanting to be like a powerhouse and being strong. So it kind of evolved from there. I started training clients one-on-one, like I said, and I just, from the get-go, was the type of person who, if you're going to do it, you need to do it super well. So I moved into corrective exercise and specialized working with athletes. And I just was always fascinated by helping people heal and recover. And I hated outsourcing my clients to a massage therapist or chiropractor or physical therapist and not being able to have my hands in the mix with that process. So injury really drew my eye. I ended up kind of specializing more in that, and that led me into Pilates. I love the postural change I would be able to see with people through Pilates. But after a couple of sessions or after they got back to their normal life, their posture or that pain would pull back. And I was very close to going and getting a kinesio tape certification just because at the time that's all I understood as far as like tape on the outside of our body. Chatted with a couple different colleagues over the years and just kind of eventually found my way into anatomy trains, which is basically studying fascia, which is the inner tape of our system. So yeah, that is a long answer to kind of what led me to my path right now. And I absolutely love it. It feels so rewarding to take somebody who needs to use their arms for work, but they can't lift their hand to shoulder height. And by the end of the session, their arm is freely moving overhead. And just to see that joy and that hope come back in the person is like I'm being paid like a millionaire.
You describe every day when we kind of get back together in the afternoon. Every day I hear you describe some of the sessions you do, and I can tell the days where you've really helped somebody, which is quite frequent. You are so happy and so proud of yourself, and also proud of the work that your clients do, obviously. But it's really cool to see that you're literally hands-on, feet-on, helping people. You mentioned Pilates, which, knowing what you do, makes perfect sense to me that that would be the path you would take. But as I recall, that wasn't something that was originally really on your radar. Like, didn't you sign up with almost like zero experience as far as Pilates goes?
Yeah, I was training, and obviously being in that industry, if you've been a trainer for a long time, you have to find a way to make yourself stand out because we're kind of a dime a dozen. So, yeah, it was literally just like a team meeting with my staff in Lifetime in Colorado, and the Pilates coordinator stood up at the front of the meeting, and I literally didn't even know how to pronounce the word at the time. And something about it that day just was really captivating. And I did a couple sessions on the reformer and was just like absolutely humbled very quickly for being an athlete my whole life. Just like, okay, you're going to hold a plank and breathe and lift a leg, and then you're moving the arm, and then you have a strap. And it just was like, it was really intense, but I loved it. I love, seeing gaps in like where I don't move well. And that kind of set me apart as far as being just an average trainer. It was another tool I had in my toolbox for clients. Yeah, and the reformer Pilates, if you've ever done it before, it's like absolutely nothing else.
Yeah, it's I think I'm still sore from the last time I did it several years ago. I just because we're talking about your own story, how do you reflect back on the year that was life changing for both of us, 2020, during the pandemic where we were both unemployed for a while? How do you reflect back on that time and reflect on what it was like to think about for the first time like running our own business?
So I ran the Pilates program at Lifetime for about 3 years prior to the pandemic. And as you probably remember, managing people was not my strong suit at all. I didn't want to be an adult babysitter, and I like things done a certain way. But at the time, if you would have told me you're going to be a business owner soon, I would have laughed in your face. I didn't think I would have ever want that responsibility. But yeah, we kind of had our backs against the wall that year. None of us saw that coming. But I think like we really pulled it together, and it was pretty obvious once we started to have a few conversations. We didn't want a boss. We wanted to be our own boss. We both were obviously super passionate about what we did, and we wanted to do it on our own terms. And the fact that I at least get the chance to do it out of our home is incredible. So yeah, a lot of uncertainty at that time, but I feel like we really made it work, as scary as it was.
Yeah, definitely. What are some of the challenges that you now face that maybe would have given you maybe second thoughts about starting a business?
Well, I think it's like the double-edged sword of you have all the control of your schedule, which is a good and bad thing. You have the ability to have afternoons off or start whenever you want or take breaks whenever you want, but you still have all the pressure of there is not a coworker that you can rely on. There's nobody lead generating for new business for you. You have to put yourself out there, make connections, be involved in the community, give people really good results that they're going to want to tell their family and friends about. So it's a slow build. It's extremely satisfying, but it's a slow process and it's not consistent all the time. And you know me, I'm like a very, very routine based person. So I like that stability. So on paper, I think for a lot of people or my personality, being a salaried employee would be the better way to go. But after getting a taste of this kind of lifestyle within the last 4.5 years, I couldn't go back.
Yeah. Well, I think about things like paid time off, and you still have not approved one of my paid time off PTO requests. It's been 4 years. Terrible. So that is a drawback because I don't get paid for taking any time off. Um, Okay, well, I love that. I love your story, and I know you said that you struggled with managing. I thought that you did a tremendous job managing that program, but like you said, the adult babysitting is where I saw the most challenges. So it's kind of nice little setup that we have where it's just the two of us and we can run things the way we want to run things. And I certainly wouldn't go back either. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
think when you have a standard of like what you'll deliver to your clients and the way you want things to be done, the way you want the studio kept up, the way that you want your schedule managed and payments run and just all the follow up and everything, it's really, really hard to delegate that to someone else when you care about it so much. So I am happy in that regard that it's in our hands.
yeah. Well, it also brings up another challenge, something that I struggle with all the time, which is scaling. You know what I mean? Like with our business, the way we do it, the way we like to do it, the only variable that we have really, besides whatever investing we want to do, is our time. And so finding ways to scale or help more people can be a real challenge when we're approaching business this way. But it is really great to be able to work with our clients in the way that we do.
I'd rather have a schedule of 3 people who are getting so much out of what I do versus 8 who are just showing up back to back.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, awesome. So I wanted to focus this conversation mostly around Rossiter. I do have questions about Pilates as well, and in your work in particular, over the years, I have drawn less and less and less lines between all of those different things. Like I don't ask as much. Like, is your session with such and such? Is it a roster session or Pilates session or personal training session? You seem to be able to flow with them in a really cool and interesting way, which I really like. But roster itself, you've already described it as you know, similar to Rolfing, which is the best way that I typically describe it. Most people, not most people, some people are at least a little bit familiar with that. But if somebody says, hey, I'm in pain, but I'm already seeing a chiropractor slash physical therapist slash, other corrective, person, massage therapist is a big one. How do you differentiate yourself and these sessions in particular?
I think we all have a place in the space of body work, so I certainly don't want to talk down on any of the other practices. I find them to be very helpful as part of the entire recipe. But the first question I always ask someone when they seek me out is, what have those therapies done for you thus far? And a lot of people feel like they've been spinning their wheels. So just the last woman I got to meet found me from an ad, and she's been doing physical therapy. She absolutely hates massage because it hurts so bad. And I think all of our listeners could relate. We've probably all at least had one massage in our life where we are on the table, and for whatever reason, that heavy pressure, deep tissue, whatever they're doing, it hurts. And our body's not relaxed. And we recognize that, but most of us don't say anything. And so the autonomy that comes with Rossiter, the flexibility, the hope that somebody gets, the ability to control the session, even though I'm the one stepping on you, you're the boss. And I'd say that every hour, you're the person who needs to communicate with me on the amount of pressure I give you, because the idea is not to just beat you up. We're not trying to leave you bruised and battered. We are really trying to get your nervous system to go more parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, and that's where healing happens. If your body's fighting it, if you're gritting your teeth, if you're just suffering through it, you're probably going to feel sore. And some people are convinced that that's what's making them feel better, or that's what the benefit is of them going. But I truly believe that the body needs to feel safe. Most of the time, physical pain, maybe it's manifesting because of a source of mental or emotional trauma. Maybe it's, you literally got hit by a car. But either way, the body doesn't know how to decipher that. Trauma is trauma, and it needs to feel safe in order to feel like it can unwind and unravel and move and change. So I usually ask people what they've been getting out of those therapies first, so I kind of know a little bit more about how they're going to respond to the work. I make sure that they understand that their role is to be a master communicator, because I'm a good Rossiter practitioner, but I'm a terrible mind reader. So I want that chatting throughout the session. As far as testing pain spots, the intention is not to come in and see me for a good time. We are trying to go straight for the source of pain, but it's not always where you think it's coming from. So the last woman I got to work with, she's had hip replacements and she's been struggling with range of motion in her knee. Just watching her get out of her car was, oh, it was a struggle for me. So we're chatting as we walk into the house, and what I'm hearing from her is that, PT went straight to strengthening exercises. So if we think about taking a rubber band, and that's just a very simple way of thinking about a tensegrity model. If you pull that rubber band apart at both sides, that rubber band's really taut. And then what we know about strength training is, while it has all of the positive beneficial effects, it is still contracting. So we're expecting something that's tense to become tighter. And no wonder people leave with pain, and they're spinning their wheels and they're doing more sessions and more sessions. So the way I try to explain to them is, we need to take that knot, we need to take that fascial adhesion or whatever is going on in their physical system, and we need to bring that to more of a baseline homeostatic level in order for the body to start to feel safe enough to unravel, unwind. And then after that, when we're consistently in a space where we have more internal space, that's the time that we want to start to learn how to stabilize and strengthen.
Gotcha. Okay, that's very interesting. I like how you said in the beginning of that explanation, like, we don't want to trash other modalities and say that, if you choose to do massage therapy or physical therapy or whatever, they're all tools, right? They can definitely help. I would say in my experience, for every time I got a massage, like whether or not it felt good while I was doing it, I always felt worse the next day. Like, it never, especially long term, really helped any of the issues I was ever having, and I always kind of felt worse afterwards. Is that something you hear pretty frequently?
Yeah, and like, I can see it in my brain. It's a tougher thing to explain to someone, but again, just taking that tensegrity model, a lot of people relate to, like, if we had a shoelace that's open on each end and you tie that shoelace in a nice tight knot in the middle, stretching, I mean, yoga in some cases, even when we haven't done soft tissue release, the body needs pressure. It needs pressure in order to unwind. So it's like taking that shoelace and pulling it from both ends, expecting the knot to get looser. We actually need to get into that knot. We need to figure out its trigger points, its connections. It might be a knee that's bugging, but the body does an amazing job of compensating so that you keep moving until it just cannot do it anymore. And pain is not a bad thing, it's information. And we have that initial pain pop up, whether it's a twinge when we get out of the chair or when we're walking, or it's a little harder to breathe, or it's soreness that just won't go away, and we ignore it. And then the body's like, okay, so we're just going to start to tighten somewhere else in another fascial sling in order to help this person to keep doing what they're doing, because they're obviously not listening. It's not stopping. And then it snowballs to a bigger problem. So a lot of times when people come to see me, I'm not the first person that they've seen. They've already done the standard massage, chiropractic, physical therapy, the stuff that's been required by their insurance, and they're frustrated. So I have a big job cut out for me at that point, because it might have started at the knee, but now what's overshadowing everything is the opposite side shoulder. And so we have to figure out how to reverse engineer, how did this person get into pain? And so we're testing different spots. We're seeing what kinds of releases are helping. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with what the area that they're coming in to see me for.
Yeah, okay. I want to talk about that specifically. But before we do, when you said pressure and pressure points, the first thing my mind went to are tools like foam rollers or lacrosse balls, or even like we've seen in the last like 5-10 years, the rise of the guns that people kind of use on their body. How do you think about those as tools? Do you think they can be helpful, or are they in some way kind of like noise or distraction in a way?
I think those definitely have a place if they're used appropriately. I always tell people some amount of pressure is better than nothing. It's definitely, you're going to get a lot more out of it than just stretching alone. However, you need a destination for that tissue to go. So I think a lot of people who do self-myofascial release, one, relating it back to what I said about the trauma state and feeling safe, if a massage gun is beating the crap out of your IT band and you're tensed against it and you're holding your breath and you're just doing what your coach told you to do, that's not really going to make a long-term change. It's going to hurt like hell when you're doing it. You may feel like you're doing something positive, but it's the same idea as a deep tissue massage. So while it's still breaking things up, while lymph is being able to move more freely, while we're creating a stimulus in blood flow and oxygen exchange, I think the gold standard is a pin and stretch. So for example, when it comes to the iliotibial band, which is a really common area that people will foam roll and foam roll and foam roll, it doesn't seem to change. So what I coach my clients to do in between our sessions to maintain some level of space is to find the pain spot with an appropriate density foam roller, which is usually a lot softer than you typically find in a gym or where you want to go. And you find that pain spot and you get into a position where you're kind of laying on your side with one leg off the roller, and you hold and you breathe. And that you might be there for 3 minutes, you might be there for 5 minutes, you might not get any amount of moving or stretching. You are holding and waiting for it to feel like it's desensitizing. Science says after about 2 minutes minimum, that's when the body starts to produce a chemical that I referred to earlier called hyaluronic acid. We've seen this in a lot of popular beauty and cosmetic products, but it's something that intrinsically is developed by the body, acting as oil between the fascial layer and the muscle. And there's not just a clear cut separation, like two layers stacked on top of each other. Fascia is really interesting. In a live body, it could not be taken out. You can't extract it. It is within the muscle. It starts inside of the bone, and it's fluid. So it's always changing, and we need to allow heat and pressure at a certain amount of time to have that hyaluronin become more present in the body in order for things to start to slip and slide and glide better.
Okay.
So I think they're great tools. They just need to, it's user error typically.
Interesting. And then a really common one that I get all the time, you must get this all the time, is stretching. I'm not very flexible, so I need to have better flexibility and I need better stretching. What are some techniques? Things like that. How do you respond to that typically?
Well, I think people need to understand that there is a difference between plasticity and elasticity. And when you think you want plasticity, what you actually are wanting is elastic recoil. We need that rebound effect. We need that glide. We need that slack in our tissues in order for your body to become flexible. Because if you want your bones to change placement, we need the glue that holds the bones together to be free.
Okay, very well explained. Earlier in this conversation, you mentioned anatomy trains. I think, again, some people might be familiar with this or maybe have heard it, but not really understood what that means. Can you talk about what anatomy trains are and why they're so critical to your work?
Yeah, so like a train track connects everything together for movement. I believe that's where Tom Myers kind of created the name from. But there are 7 different myofascial meridians, muscle fascia. They create all different sorts of connection points between different areas of the body. Again, for example, like the spiral line wrapping around like a sash, connecting your right shoulder to your left hip, and then your right foot to the left side of your low back. And so it's not as cut and dry. And it was really interesting after, being in exercise science classes to really have a huge misunderstanding of the body until I got to see the inside of it, to know how everything worked together and was connected, because I think we all are kind of under the notion that muscle is attached to bone and those levers and pulleys work with tendons and ligaments, and we don't tend to have really much education about the rest of the connective tissue, and not just its structure, but its intelligence of being able to be pressure sensitive, to be innervated, to give responses, know when to tense viscerally. I mean, think about if you were to get a stressful text message right now, you'd have a physical response to it without something having to hit you. So that's happening all the time during every day and every single situation. And our body has that stored in a memory bank. And you might not remember it mentally, but your body does.
Okay, well, we mentioned a very cringy episode that we did. We also mentioned in the introduction an episode that we did, 353, where we talked about your experience of getting into bodies. It's been 2 years essentially since you've done that, and I did want to ask you, so I'm just going to ask it now in the middle of this conversation. How has that impacted you 2 years later? Do you still think about that experience, and does that affect your work on a daily basis?
Oh, I think that's in my mind for every single session that I do, whether it's a movement session teaching Pilates or whether it's like feet on people doing Rossiter. It gave me such a different understanding and respect for how the body is all connected and how it moves, and it's just so intricately designed. And it made me really realize that we largely get in our own way. Our body knows what to do if we pay attention.
Okay, well explained. You mentioned earlier that pain can sometimes manifest in it can manifest in a spot but not be the cause. And when you write about this, you'll say something like the criminals and the victims, which I find really interesting to ponder. If somebody came to me with lower back pain, for example, my instinct is to say like, okay, let's address strengthening in the lower back, without thinking like, wait a minute, like what shoes are you wearing on a daily basis or whatever. So can you talk, yeah, use that as an example, the criminals and the victims, and how you talk about that and how you use that to help people understand why, they have pain in their right shoulder, so you're working on their left hip.
I think I heard it for the first time from Ruth Nottage, who was one of Richard Rossiter's counterparts that I was lucky enough to get certification with. And I think it might have been one of my first releases in my own body, where they worked on my left calf and my right hip, which ever since I was in gymnastics as a kid always felt really like turned out and hiked up, and it released that. And I felt this like floaty, airy sensation, but it was so confusing because they did not touch my right side. So Ruth would say, the victims do the crying out, never the criminals. And I think that's, like you said, a really captivating way to look at it, that where you are feeling the source of, or where you're feeling the pain, is not always the root cause or the source of where the pain is coming from. And so when I see somebody new, I want them, like I mentioned earlier, I'm usually not the first practitioner that's going to see them. So they come up and they're hearing someone's going to stand on them and they're already a little freaked out by that. I like them to feel validated that I'm listening to where their pain is. And so what I tell everyone, let's say you're coming to see me for tension headaches and migraines and trap pain. Well, I know that it's not your traps that are contacting the ground. It's not your traps that are grabbing onto your phone and your steering wheel, but it's obviously traveled up there. So I will tell people we're going to start with the logical approach, which is going to be a full upper body release, which usually involves the hands, the forearms on both sides, the biceps, the triceps, both anterior and posterior deltoid, pecs. But what they realize after, and I have people walk in between techniques to kind of cue me into what's changing and if we're on the right track, most of the time, by the time we have released the forearms and the biceps, that trap pain's not there. And so I like to just bring people's attention to that, like, hey, we haven't touched this yet. So for your reference, maybe some of the things that you're doing in your life with your hands are creating some of the tension you're feeling up top.
Yeah. So is it fair to say, when I tell people what Rossiter does for somebody, oftentimes I'll say it's creating space in the body?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Space, glide, freedom. Lymph is so important. Lymphatic movement is the key for keeping all of our tissues healthy. If they're being exposed to too much oxidative stress, whether it's through poor eating or a lot of sugar consumption, not enough movement, a stressed out lifestyle, all of those things are just, I mean, we can all feel that like physical tightening happening.
Yeah. Okay. I've seen you do enough sessions to become quite used to this, but when somebody oftentimes will stand up, if you are going in the right direction, I see a look on their face like they're maybe like a little bit buzzed or something.
We call it Rossiter drunk.
Rossiter drunk. Tell me about that.
Especially in Utah, when most people here have not ever experienced real drunk before and they're about to run into my wall. Yeah, it's a really interesting sensation. I always am encouraged by that. I explain that that's a really positive thing because the body is the nervous system's getting a huge shift. It's kind of like, what the heck's going on? We got to figure this out. But simply put, it's a lot of oxygen flow to and from the brain in a short amount of time. And I think that's just overwhelming to the system at first. It usually doesn't last very long. And the more sessions that you do, you're a lot more unentrapped than you were when we first started. So that tends to get less and less. Those that see me, just as like body tune-ups or maintenance, they tend to experience it a little bit more. But yeah, it's been interesting.
So far we've only talked about like physical ailments and physical pain inside the body, but you can use these techniques for some rather interesting other things as well, like respiratory. Can you tell me about some of the other modalities that Rossiter is used for to help people?
Yeah, so 2 other branches that I did as advanced certifications are respiratory releases, which involves so part of the deep front line, which is one of the myofascial meridians, connects all the way from the plantar fascia, the soles of the feet, deeply in your calves in between the tibia and fibula, and runs up your adductors. It involves your entire pelvic floor, your anus, your guts, and it's basically what holds your gut bags to your spine. So it has connections all the way up the thoracic and up under the rib cage into the masseter, the jaw, and the temples. So we're kind of layered like an onion. That's a really simple way of looking at it. Or if you want to think about like an orange, taking the peel off, how it has that netty, webby kind of texture all the way down to the inside of the fruit. That's what's going on with our body in layers. And so when it comes to breathing, you can be doing all the meditation under the sun, you can be walking, you can be this healthy person, but if you are not breathing, that's the direct sensor to everything else in your nervous system. Am I okay or am I not okay? Our breathing changes, and that's going to change our whole internal state. So we need to make sure that everything is free. So poor posture, for example, probably what you're seeing in our conversation right now, how we're slumped forward, or how you might be listening to your phone or watching this on YouTube and you're hunched. That forward flexion, that closer to fetal position in a prolonged amount of time over years of your life is teaching your body, okay, this is what they need to do, so we're going to stick this to this. So if the shoulders are coming forward, the head's coming forward, the rib cage is closing, over time, the body is going to adjust to that posture and everything is going to get more or less sticky on the inside. So with respiratory releases, what I'm doing is creating space between the intercostals, freeing up the diaphragm. The diaphragm and lungs work as a pump, which is also something I misunderstood until I got to see the inside of the body. So this is a common practice if you have done Pilates, diaphragmatic breathing. And you only will be able to do this if you have spatial access to it. So as the diaphragm lifts up, that's when the lungs are expanding, and when the diaphragm drops, that's when the lungs are contracting to let that exhale out. But if that pump is not working, and for most of us it's not, it's stuck to the sides, it's stuck to the back, or we're breathing in a more shallow sense, you're going to notice the raise and fall of the shoulders. And that over time, so you might have trap pain, that's just a diaphragm issue. So I do respiratory releases, and then recently what I've been doing a lot more of are for TMJ issues. I have people, funnily enough, come in and say, I think I have TMJ. We all have TMJ. It's temporomandibular joint, but it's just if the TMJ is dysfunctioning or not. So a lot of times this can be linked to sinus pressure for people, grinding of their teeth, chipping teeth at night, just an overall sense of tension they can't release in their jaw. So that's another practice that I do with my hands, which is a very robust face massage. It involves freeing up that masseter, the temples. We get movement through the ears. Sometimes I'll do inside of mouth work. And then the sternocleidomastoid is a big player as well. It's kind of that muscle when you turn your head to the side that juts out. That usually gets pretty stuck to the first rib. So we need to make freedom through all of those areas in order for everything to have enough slack.
Okay, that was very well explained, and I like that you use the term gut bags. I think that's the first time on our show anybody's ever said gut bag, so I'll have to
say it one more time for the listeners. Gut bags.
Gut bag. We'll have to see if we need to go back and edit that out, but somebody might be offended. Okay, so I love all that, and I love that you mentioned earlier on that you might be able to get somebody out of pain relatively quickly comparative to what people do. Again, not to bash on a physical therapist or a massage therapist, but it seems to me like it's those are sessions that I see people do, a package of like 36 sessions. I don't see you ever do that. You work with some people on like a weekly basis because they love it. But also if somebody were experiencing pain, my observation is they get out of pain relatively quickly. It might take a few sessions, but it's almost like the kind of work that I do with nutrition coaching, where it's like, if somebody is interested and they want to do a few sessions, that's great. But after a few sessions, people kind of have it down and they don't really need to see me as much. What is it about the way you work with people that basically means they don't have to be coming to you all the time? They can like really make a dent in just a few sessions.
I mean, I think it's as simple as we're trying to find the source. Like they're not there to keep coming back to me. Like you said, I think a lot of people just like really fall in love with how well their bodies move and feel. And some people just honestly, when I get them down on the mat, it's like everybody starts confessing their sins. Bethany, I have not been doing my foam rolling. I don't even know where my lacrosse ball is. And so we outsource it, right? So I think for those people, they know they don't have the time, or they know they're not going to spend their free time doing fascia work, but they benefit from how it feels. So I see those people more regularly, but I tell my other clients, like, I know this is working when you start to fire me. So I don't want you to be fully reliant. I want you to be doing your homework, because I want on that trip to Scotland, you to be the weirdo on the airplane who has the lacrosse ball and you're doing some tissue work on yourself, because that shows me that, I mean, you have to have an investment in your own body, because you can't put all your eggs in my basket.
Hmm.
So I love for them to do that. I think that, some people do it more than others, but that's really where, through your education with me, I have conversations now in every single session with someone who's new. How are you eating? Because you can be moving well, you can be doing your tissue release, but if you are consuming refined carbohydrates and sugar, if you're not, getting around 10K steps, or at least, doing a stand, sit, desk, or some intention of moving, hydration, sleep management, all of those things, like your weakest link is going to pull back to pain and structural issues.
Okay, so you mentioned a few things there. Are those common tips and tricks that you'll give to somebody as far as nutrition goes? Is it just simply eliminating the sugar and flour? Do you talk about seed oils? Do you talk about like adding things in? Like what kinds of things are you trying to do with your people as far as nutrition goes?
I speak to my own experience. I mean, while I'm lucky enough to not have had chronic or acute pain in most of my life, I definitely have struggled with food. And I tell a lot of the women that I tread lighter when I'm talking to women about especially animal-based eating, because they tend to close off pretty quickly because it's very unconventional. But I tell them, if you would have told me that I would be eating ground beef, brisket, eggs, butter, avocado, salmon, just meat, and craving it and thriving and having a body that I feel like I really love living in, I would have never believed you. And so I usually, start trying to just make like one little change, or hear about what they're currently doing with their day, and we just attack like one meal at a time, or what's one sugary item that we can start to take out. Recently I've been seeing a lot of people come in with CGMs, which I love. I love that that's like a real-time teacher for people about, you don't have to rely on your doctor's advice. You can see, when I eat that watermelon, what happens to my numbers? When I eat that steak, what happens to my numbers? And, what you see over time is that go hand in hand with, when there's less inflammation in the body, there's less excessive load and weight on the joints, the pain gets less. And so, I obviously could take credit for that with Rossiter, but I think it's like a full circle experience that the person has to dive into head first.
I mean, one of our favorite phrases is when pain increases, hearing improves. And if somebody is in that much physical pain, like cutting out sugar and grains is not that easy. And some people, maybe have an aversion to meat, or they are worried about cholesterol or think it's unhealthy. I notice a pattern, especially with women, where they might not even want red meat in the beginning. And then that's typically all they'll crave after a little while. But I'm sure it's a wonderful motivator when people are getting out of pain, when they change their diet and they're seeing you at the same time.
Yeah, I love when they, like I said, jump in with both feet, because it does make the whole process a lot smoother. You're always like, that rate limiting effect is always going to be, are you sleeping? Are you moving? How are you eating? And yeah, it makes the tissue so sticky and tacky when you are consuming sugar regularly. And I think we've all been in those phases, especially our listener base, I believe, is, more open to things low carb and carnivore. Um, but I think we've all had those times in our lives where we've relied on sugar and carbohydrates more. And when you have that polarity, that difference, to feel like, oh, this is how a human should move, this is how a human should feel, I think it's, the person's sold. There's no going back.
Yeah, I think joint pain is one of the most consistent things that people talk about, as far as like, I had joint pain every single day. It was really uncomfortable. I took, whatever pain meds, and now I don't have that anymore, and directly link that to, diet and other lifestyle things I find very interesting. But I find that to be very, very consistent with most people, is actually like the pain in the joints.
Yeah, and some people, I mean, that's what I think makes a good coach and a good trainer, is figuring out the exact personality type you're working with, all the things that they realistically have going on in their life. We could all say, stop eating this and start eating this, but you have to really tailor it to, like, food is emotional for a lot of people. It's a source of reward or love or relaxation, and pulling the rug out from under them isn't going to help their stress levels at all. So I think figuring out who you have in front of you and tailoring your approach to just, giving them some trade-offs, rather, instead of like, let's take this out, or I try to phrase it more like, let's try a couple of weeks of this type of breakfast instead of this type of breakfast, and let's just talk. Let's see how you feel. Is it doable with all that you have going on in the morning? How can we like prep something ahead of time? Just coming up with like realistic life strategies for them, so it's something that's like attainable and sustainable. But there are certain people who you have to tough love and say, okay, You've been seeing me for knee pain for 6 weeks. What do you like more? Do you like stopping for the cookie and the soda on the way home, or do you want to get out of your car without pain?
Yeah, I really like that. Well, I know you've had this before, but what do you say to somebody that says, "Oh, I don't need to worry about nutrition. I'm already eating healthy. I wake up and have my spinach smoothie, and then I'll have a salad for lunch, and then I have a sweet potato with dinner." What do you say to that person?
Inside, I cringe for a minute before I have to get my composure. I mean, like I'm sure the standard American diet is worse than those things. And so I try to not rip them a new one and make them feel bad because they think what they're doing is, super healthy. But there's a reason they're seeking out help. Like something isn't working.
Yeah,
So the definition of insanity, right? Like
yeah.
we have to make some kind of a change. And I have found that for most of my people, what do you have to lose by giving something a month?
Yeah.
Even if it's one food group or one meal, and maybe it's not even taking out the spinach, but it's adding something more nutrient dense into the mix, that then when they're starting to feel the benefits of that, we can slowly pull something out.
Cool. I think that's totally reasonable. I'll never forget an experience where we were with family and you saw somebody eat raw spinach right out of the bag and it just came right out of your mouth without. I know you felt so bad about it, but you were like, "Are you going to eat that raw?" And then you immediately like caught yourself like, "Oh, I'm sorry, should have said that." Like,
Yeah,
whatever.
this is why we don't go out when we
Yeah,
work.
exactly. Okay, so my last kind of question that's directly related to Rossiter is how come nobody knows about this? Like, there's not very many practitioners out there. It's hard to even recommend different practitioners for people that don't live here and can't see you directly. What is it about Rossiter that's such a, I don't know, so esoteric and like hardly anybody even knows about it now?
I really think that some companies pour more money and effort into marketing and, no hate against Richard Rossiter whatsoever, but he was a bit older when he took over and created this method. So I don't think there was that push to market it as well as other forms of body work. Yeah, most people I talk to have never heard of it before. It's always such a treat when I do get somebody who has. Um, yeah, I think it's just like a branding issue. There are several thousand roster practitioners sprinkled across the US, Canada, and the UK, but we are spread out pretty far and we're not recognized by insurance, which is also a bummer. I think any like massive therapy, whether it's body work or nutrition, will never be recognized by something like that because it
Yeah,
works.
yeah.
And it's not going to keep you sick. It's not going to keep you reliant on the system. It's not going to keep you medicated. And that's not where money's made.
Yep. Very well said. We're very fortunate that we were able to interview Richard on our show twice, actually, which I really love. And I don't even know where he is in the world now. Have you communicated anything with him?
Last email I got was post pandemic, just shortly after. I believe he was moving to Korea, but I'm not sure. So
Yeah,
hopefully he ended up in South Korea.
yeah. I hope that's the better one, I think. Um, okay, interesting. Now, as somebody is healing their pain, they're starting to move better. I notice this again with nutrition as well. People start eating a little bit better now. Movement that used to be a chore now becomes something that people want to do. They want to move in a way that's safe and effective. They have this boundless amount of energy that they didn't used to have. Shameless plug on our
I was
company.
just going to say.
But people experience that and they want to move. And so again, as a personal trainer and also somebody who does teaches Pilates and is very highly certified in that, what do you kind of lean towards? How do you know what to do with somebody as far as the movement piece goes?
I think at this point, I used to do movement screens, the FMS. I used to have all this like structure behind how I would assess movement. I have a really good idea of where we need to start when I just see you walk in the door. When I see the type of footwear you come in with, when I see how you hold your stature when we're talking, I'm not judging you, but I'm kind of like scanning and identifying, okay, their feet turn out, so I know they're most likely going to have a weak arch, which is probably going to lead to some knee valgus, which is probably going to lead to overly stretched and under-strengthened glutes, which we know we're not using your core in that situation. So probably your head is following all of that and coming forward. So that's not every single person I see. I would say that's probably like 80% of the common pattern. But I usually believe we need to start with creating space in the areas that are not allowing our body to align appropriately, making that person aware of what I see and making an explanation and giving them some reasons why we need to start paying attention to our type of footwear or how we're holding our body in space, because you might train with me at a max like 1 hour a week, but you still have all those other hours to either positively or negatively reinforce what we want the goal to be. So, I would say my female clients are more open to Pilates at first. I love getting to train men because it's really eye-opening for them that Pilates is not just stretching. I get to have my own fun there. But yeah, strength training I think is a non-negotiable for everyone at any age. I think having appropriate muscle mass, having the ability to have proprioception, interoception, know how to functionally move when it's not just swinging a kettlebell or picking up a barbell, but picking your kid up or bending over to tie your shoes. So I really like to take the practical approach to things, give people a lot of bang for their buck with compound movements. Everybody likes to train in a slightly different style. And, I do want to make you sweat. I want your heart rate to get up or whatever makes you feel like you've been successful, but everybody needs a different combination. We kind of just pick on the spot.
Okay. And then the customization of your programs. I understand all those same parameters, and I will often say, like, your program is going to be different than anybody else's, which is certainly true. I don't train any two people exactly the same way. People have, like you said, even just personal preferences. Like today, I trained a guy that we do the exact same routine every time, and he loves it. And the next client I trained would fire me if we did the same session twice. And we've been training together 3 days a week for like 15 years at this point. So I always need to be changing up his routine. So anyway, on that note, do you find that you train all of your people vastly differently when it comes to strength training, or do you tend to follow the same kind of principles when you're putting together a program for somebody?
Principles and structure pretty much the same in the fact that, like, I believe all humans need to push, pull, bend, squat, lunge, and rotate well. I think with Pilates, the big difference between that and strength training is it's coming from like a core centered approach where we focus a lot more on body awareness, flexibility, stability, and you're kind of, with spring tension and straps, you're moving from your core center. So you're stabilizing there and letting your limbs respond to what's going on in the middle section. And so I can't help but turn that part of my brain off when I am teaching someone how to even Olympic lift. So I think the principle is all the same, but again, like even personality comes into that. I want you to feel like you've been successful. And so some people, that is, if I show up and I stretch and I move my body in that way, I've done my workout. Some people need to do a little bit more like HIIT training like we've talked about, but I tend to kind of lean more towards what you do with your clients. I believe I find benefit in slow, controlled, eccentric, concentric movement, isometric holds, anti-rotation, breathing diaphragmatically when we are exercising. All that to say, you still are a therapist. And so you're taking people through workouts when you're hearing about all of their life stress and everything they've got going on. So it looks different for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I like that you mentioned the therapy piece. Downstairs where your workspace is, you have the posters of all the anatomy trains, and we're very selective about the things that we put up in our house, especially in that workspace. And the one other really prominent thing that's on the wall is that emotion wheel. How has that helped you with any of your work with either movement, Pilates, strength training, or Rossiter?
I thought that it was going to be implemented a lot more when I put it up. I think that a lot of people don't notice that it's down there largely, but if I'm doing a session with someone who's new or, a little bit more closed off, either to the work or because they've experienced intense trauma, there's a dissociation that's happened between how they feel physically and how they can relay that to someone else. So I find that wheel can be helpful for those populations where they can kind of just take a look at it, and instead of trying to describe, they can just point to a color or one of the words, and that will help me help them, because no feedback makes it really tough. So in that way, I feel like it's been helpful, but I've learned to not give people like questions that have yes or no answers, trying to keep it more open-ended, or giving them options like, does it feel lighter? Does it feel heavier? Does it feel tighter? Does it feel looser? Is it airy? Do you feel restricted? So those kinds of things. But really, I feel like people within the first or second session, they learn what's supposed to be happening, and they do a lot better job relaying what they're experiencing.
Yeah. Okay. On the Pilates side of things in particular, the way you used to do it was always in a group setting. And so you could have 5, completely different people with 5 completely different goals. Now all you do is one-on-one. How has that experience changed the way you teach Pilates in particular?
We have a third guest here. There's a spider on your mic trying to join the
Oh no, I hate
conversation.
spiders.
This will get interesting. I'm sorry, say that question one more time.
You used to always work in Pilates in groups, right? Like
Yeah.
you'd have 5 different bodies with 5 different goals come in, and now you're working one-on-one with people. How has that changed your practice, and how has teaching Pilates in that way evolved for you over time?
I loved teaching group. I would do it once a week if I had the opportunity, but I really love the chance to connect with somebody one on one. I know what it's felt like in my own body to feel like, oh, I don't even want to be here. I don't like this. I'm not strong. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel embarrassed. And I really like the person to feel like they have not only done it, but they've done it well. And it's something that they can go apply in the rest of their day. So I prefer teaching one-on-one at this point. I'm lucky that I've got a client base who wants to do that kind of stuff privately, and it's a better chance. Like, you might be like, I'm thinking of Margie, for example. She was a great class participant, but her ability now in private to be able to just ask, like, am I doing that right? Should I move that arm? Should I move that leg? I feel like they get more out of the practice because, especially at the beginning, I want people to show up and to be doing it with proper form.
Okay. I do miss you teaching the group class that had all my hockey buddies.
Brilottis.
It was always great to hear in the locker room how things were going and just a
A
bunch of
lot of
idiots.
groaning, a
Yeah.
lot of groaning.
I love it. Okay, so tell us about your work here again in person, how you work with people, and also, we get reached out to quite a bit from people that obviously aren't in Utah. How do you help them? Like, what things would you want to tell them, or do you have any offerings or services or ways you'd want to work with people?
Yeah, having lived in several different places, I still have some contacts that trained with me in Minnesota and Colorado that I love, love, love working with. Virtual, since the pandemic, that opened up an entire avenue of training in Pilates and even body work that didn't really exist before. So if you're not located near us and any of this stuff sounds kind of interesting to you, or you've felt like you've spun your wheels with the other things that you've tried in the past, or just kind of looking to change it up, yeah, we offer virtual services as well. Obviously, I can't step on you from afar. You're always welcome to take a road trip and come see us. But I do love getting on calls with people and teaching them, showing them with proper tools how to do your own fascia work, just like I teach my clients after a Rossiter session. In the pandemic, I ran mat Pilates classes. I do reformer Pilates privates virtually as well if you happen to have a reformer at your house. Strength training is obviously easy if you've got your own equipment there too. Yeah, so both in person, virtual, happy to take people on. I don't think there's many days of the week we don't work. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, pre-pandemic, I thought, the idea of training somebody virtually, let alone doing body work with somebody virtually, I would have thought would have been absolutely impossible. And it has become such a viable option, and one that a lot of people even prefer. I've got people that live here in the valley, and, I can get to their place relatively quickly, but they actually prefer doing virtual sessions. So it's kind of interesting how that's evolved into a viable option for those things, and it is effective for body work. You can definitely show people like some things,
Yeah,
even though you're not physically stepping on them.
I think that for that kind of thing, it would be more of like I can show you how to release most areas of your body within 2 sessions virtually. So it would just be a matter of like showing you what to do, how to do it well, make sure you have the right tools, getting feedback, those kinds of things, and then it's pretty self-sustainable after that.
Okay, and then just one of your favorite stories. It could be something from today, could be something huge or minor, just like something that got you really excited about doing what you do.
Ooh, that one puts me on the spot, mostly because I just have like so many in my head. Um, I mean, I think a really cool, like recent one, I called you down to the basement for Jim. He's been loading bags for Delta for like 10 plus years. And we, like all of us, we start to carry our things in our dominant hand, and that develops a pattern, and we get stiff on the other side, and you won't choose to brush your teeth with the opposite hand. So he's loading these bags, and he's always throwing them over his same side shoulder. You notice his golf game starts to suffer. He just doesn't feel optimal, and so this crazy girl who's stepping on him, his wife actually sent him in, and he was alarmed at first. He's like, what are you going to do with those poles? And we start talking about food. Long story short, he ends up getting so much relief in his shoulder that work isn't hurting him. He's able to go back to his golf game. And I called Casey down to the basement to just hear about his success. He's lost 20 pounds so far going carnivore in the last 6 weeks. And he's feeling good. He's like fitting into clothes that he hasn't before. He's like, is it weird that all I want is like steak and eggs and like I'm not even craving anything that I'm seeing my coworkers eat anymore? It's just like super cool to see somebody come full circle like that and, you know, take ownership, and they really have themselves to thank. Again, they're not reliant on a shot or a medication or someone else. Like, they're showing up and doing the work, and it's not easy, but it's simple.
Yeah, I love that. What is something I haven't asked you yet that I should have?
Why does your hair look so good today?
That's a great question. That is a great question. It's styled. I just got my hair cut, so it's
I was
styled.
gonna say, you're actually looking way better out of the two of us. I'm sweating so much.
Yeah, it's a little bit warm. Yeah, I told the lady doing my hair, she asked if I wanted her to do my hair as I was leaving, and I'm like, absolutely, because this is the best it's ever gonna look. And like after me trying to do this, it's like a downhill from there.
She's killing it. I vote that we bring her in as another wife.
That sounds great. That sounds great. And that was going to be my last question: is who's your favorite husband?
You.
Oh,
you.
Very sweet. Bethany, before we started this chat, you were a bit nervous and you didn't think that you could talk about this for an hour and have anything interesting to say. I think this discussion has been quite interesting, and it has been an hour. I feel like we barely skimmed the surface on some of the stuff that we can talk about, but I think this would be really helpful and practically valuable for people. So I really appreciate you sitting down with me.
I appreciate it too. I think we all have imposter syndrome and we don't think that we have anything to say that's of value, but now I'm warmed up for Carnivore Revolution. This is my test run. But before we go, I have a dad joke for you.
Oh, good.
Your favorite.
Here we go.
What did one strawberry say to the other strawberry?
Oh, I don't know.
I think we're in a jam.
That's
all I've got for today.
Well, thank you for the dad joke. That's one lesson I have to hear later in the afternoon in the kitchen. So I appreciate you subjecting to our listeners to that as well.
You guys are welcome.
Babe, I really, obviously I have to say this, but I'm going to say it. I really admire you and your work and the hard work that you put into the business. This was not easy. None of this was easy. And making the decisions that we made here on the porch. And we decided to do our own kind of 60-day challenge when we were back at the company that we were working for before. And we went our own then. And all these unconventional things that we've done, including starting the business and figuring stuff out as we go. I'm really proud of you. You came up with the name Boundless Body, which I instantly loved. I get to hear about your work every single day, and I don't get sick of hearing about it. I really love it, and I know how much you care, and I wish your clients knew how much you really truly do care about them and how much we talk about them. And yeah, anyway, I love you and I love your work, and I love that you sat down and took some time with us today. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
I have a really, really poorly run Instagram, Bethany Boundless Body, but you can reach out through our website, myboundlessbody.com. We're also on Facebook, so you can find our Facebook group or my personal page. And yeah, you'll have direct links to my direct cell phone number as well. That's the way I like to do it old-fashioned, reach out to people over the phone. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot me a message, give me a call, and we can chat.
Give you a call?
Yeah.
This is 2024.
Fax me.
Beep
you. Beat me if you want to reach me.
I don't think anybody has used a phone for
TikTok
a decade now. Yeah, look us up in the phone book. No wonder our marketing strategy hasn't worked. We've been paying thousands of dollars in phone book ads. Not really working out. Yeah, that's fantastic. And when people do go to our website, myboundlessbody.com, I've made it a point to have the very first thing they see, besides a picture of us, which we're looking really good in that picture, but is a book now button where people can set up a consultation with us. So if you're interested in setting up a consultation, please let us know there through the Book Now feature. And you can also specify that you would much rather talk to Bethany than some bum like me. So just make sure you let us know on the website, but that's a place that you can do that. So again, Bethany, you are incredible and amazing, and I really admire you, and I just love you very much. And thank you so very much for sitting down to have this chat. I think it will be very valuable, like I said. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for everybody tuning in. We appreciate you guys so much.
Absolutely. We just passed 500,000 downloads. Could you ever imagine?
Somebody send us a steak.
Oh my goodness, that would be great. Please send us a steak. That would be great. Well, thank you again, Bethany. I love you very much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.